The operating room fell silent. Dr. Michael Morrison's hands trembled as he stared at the monitor, his 30 years of surgical experience offering no preparation for what glowed on the screen. Behind him, nurses froze mid-motion. The anesthesiologist's fingers hovered over medication vials. "In 3 decades," Morrison whispered, "I've never seen anything like this." On the X-ray, a metal object sat lodged against Robert Davidson's spine, a dark shadow that had been hiding there for 38 years. The 45-year-old man lay unconscious on the table, his damaged heart valve waiting for repair, his body covered in weeping blisters that had brought him to death's door. Through the observation window, his daughter Claire pressed her hand against the glass, her white coat marking her as one of them, a cardiologist in this very hospital. Beside her, his wife Maggie collapsed into a chair, rosary beads clutched between shaking fingers. The heart monitor beeped erratically. "Doctor, his pressure's dropping." Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now, let's continue with the story. 3 months earlier, Robert Davidson had noticed the first blister on his forearm while shaving. He dismissed it as dry skin, nothing more than an irritation from the harsh Portland autumn. At 45, he'd survived the Gulf War, buried his first wife, and remarried his late wife's best friend. A small blister seemed insignificant. The modest suburban home he shared with Margaret, Maggie, sat nestled among maple trees turning gold and crimson, white picket fence, well-tended garden, the kind of place that whispered of second chances. Inside, photographs of Jennifer lined the hallway. His first wife, dead 3 years now in a car accident that still haunted his dreams. The blue shirt he wore every Saturday had been her last gift to him, now faded from repeated washing but never discarded. Maggie, at 68, moved through the house with the quiet efficiency of a retired nurse. She'd served in Vietnam, seen things that left shadows in her eyes. Her friendship with Jennifer stretched back to high school, to days when life seemed simpler. Now she made corn muffins every Sunday morning using Jennifer's recipe, played Sam Cooke's "You Send Me" on repeat, and watched Robert with growing concern. In his home office, locked in the bottom drawer of his desk, sat a metal box Robert never discussed. Inside it, secrets that had shaped his entire adult life. A bullet casing engraved with a date, April 14th, 1987. Cash bundled and labeled. A letter written in his own hand. Confession and plea combined. 38 miles away, his daughter Claire lived alone in a sterile apartment. Her marriage dissolved. Her relationship with her father shattered. At 38, she'd become a cardiologist at St. Mary's Hospital, throwing herself into saving other people's fathers, other people's husbands. Her walls held her mother's medical journals, letters she'd read and reread, searching for answers to questions she couldn't articulate. She hadn't spoken to Robert since Jennifer's funeral. The wound was too fresh, the anger too raw. He'd been on a business trip when her mother died. Claire had held Jennifer's hand alone, watched the light fade from her eyes alone, said goodbye alone. That Robert had remarried within 2 years, to Maggie, of all people, felt like betrayal. Robert's lower back ached constantly, an old injury he claimed came from a hunting accident decades ago. He touched it unconsciously in his sleep, a gesture Maggie noticed but never questioned. Some doors were meant to stay closed. The blister on his arm spread. Then another appeared on his neck. By the end of September, Robert counted 47. His reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a man aging rapidly, skin betraying him, eyes carrying the weight of unpaid debts. He deserved this, he thought. Whatever was coming, he deserved it. October 15th arrived, with rain hammering against the conference room windows. Robert sat at the polished table, his presentation flickering on the screen behind him, when the room began to tilt. He'd worn long sleeves, despite the office heat, hiding the blisters that now covered his arms, his neck, parts of his chest. They wept constantly, leaving stains on his collar that he couldn't explain away. "Rob, you okay?" Jake from accounting stood halfway out of his chair. "You look pale." "Just tired." Robert's voice sounded distant to his own ears. "Deadline stress." His hand shook as he reached for the laser pointer. The small device clattered against the table. He tried to catch it, missed, and felt his knee buckle. The conference table rushed up to meet him. He caught himself with both hands, barely, feeling the blisters on his palms burst from the impact. The room erupted. Someone shouted for 911. His boss, Susan, grabbed his shoulders, steadying him, and saw the blood seeping through his collar. "Jesus, Robert, how long has this been going on?" "Few weeks." The words came out slurred. "It's just an allergy." By the time the paramedics arrived, Robert had collapsed completely. The EMTs peppered him with questions he couldn't focus on. When did the rash start? Any fever? Trouble breathing? He mumbled responses that made no sense even to himself. "Sir, we need to transport you to the hospital." "No." Robert tried to sit up, failed. "Can't afford it. Insurance won't cover enough." The paramedics exchanged glances. They'd heard this before. People choosing potential death over certain bankruptcy. Jake intervened, helping Robert to his feet. "I'm driving you to urgent care." No arguments. The MedExpress clinic smelled of antiseptic and resignation. A physician assistant, who looked barely old enough to vote, examined Robert with cursory attention, eyes already moving to the next patient before finishing with this one. "Contact dermatitis," the PA announced, typing into his tablet without looking up. "Possibly stress-induced eczema. Any recent life changes?" "Wife died 3 years ago." Robert stared at his hands. "Remarried last year." "That explains it." The PA printed prescriptions with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong. "Steroid cream, antihistamine. If it doesn't improve in 2 weeks, see a dermatologist." Psychosomatic responses to grief and major life changes are common. Robert accepted the papers with something like relief. Just stress. Just grief manifesting in his skin. Nothing that couldn't be managed with drugstore remedies. On the way out, he passed a mirror in the hallway and deliberately looked away, afraid of what he might see. Jake dropped him home with promises to check in. Robert sat alone in his car for 10 minutes, eyes closed, and saw Jennifer's face. Younger, terrified, holding a gun with both hands. The memory came unbidden as it always did, sharp and unforgiving. Inside, Maggie was making dinner. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and garlic, familiar and grounding. She saw the bandage on his neck before he could hide it. "Honey, what happened?" "Nothing." Robert moved toward the stairs. "Just a rash. Doctor said it's stress-related." "Let me see it." "I need a shower." He escaped to the bathroom and locked the door, turning the water as hot as he could stand. The spray hit the blisters, and he bit back a scream, gripping the sink edge until his knuckles went white. Blood and clear fluid spiraled down the drain. Downstairs, Maggie found his discarded shirt on the bedroom floor. The collar was stiff with dried blood. She held it for a long moment, then pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled as she typed symptoms into the search bar. Severe blistering, spontaneous, spreading rapidly, mouth involvement. The results made her stomach drop. Pemphigus vulgaris, autoimmune blistering disorder, can be fatal if untreated. She bookmarked the pages, heart hammering, and heard Robert cry out from the bathroom. "Robert?" She rushed to the door. "Are you okay?" "Fine." His voice was strained. "Water just stings." That night, Maggie lay awake beside him, listening to his restless movements. He kept touching his lower back in his sleep, fingers seeking something. She remembered Jennifer once saying, years ago over coffee, "Robert carries his past in his body." At the time, Maggie had thought it poetic. Now she wondered what Jennifer had really meant. Across town, Claire's phone lit up with a voicemail notification. Maggie's worried voice filled the dark apartment. "Claire, it's about your father. He has some kind of rash. I'm worried. Please call me back." Claire stared at her mother's photo on the nightstand, then deleted the voicemail without responding. She turned off the phone and pulled the covers over her head, but sleep wouldn't come. Guilt was a familiar companion, unwelcome but persistent. 2 weeks crawled by like wounded animals. The steroid cream sat unopened on Robert's nightstand, a monument to denial. By day 8, the blisters covered 70% of his body. His fingers were too swollen and painful to button his own shirt. Maggie helped him dress each morning, her nurse's training keeping her movements efficient, even as her heart broke. "This isn't getting better, Robert." She guided his arms through the sleeves. "You need a real doctor. It's only been a week. Give the medicine time. You haven't opened the medicine." He had no answer for that. By day 10, fever arrived like an unwelcome guest. 101.5 degrees. Maggie insisted on taking his temperature, despite his protests, watched the mercury climb, felt his skin burning under her palm. "We're going to the ER." "No!" The vehemence in his voice shocked them both. "We can't afford another hospital bill." Maggie stepped back, stunned by his anger. In their year of marriage, he'd never raised his voice to her. Robert's face crumpled immediately, the fury draining away as quickly as it had come. "Please, Maggie." His voice broke. "Just a few more days. If it's not better by day 14, I'll see a dermatologist, I promise." She wanted to argue, to drag him to the car by force if necessary. But she'd learned in Vietnam that you couldn't save people who didn't want saving. Day 14, that's it. Day 12 brought bed sheets stained with blood and fluid that no amount of washing could fully clean. Maggie cried in the laundry room where Robert couldn't hear, pressing his ruined linens against her face to muffle the sound. When she returned upstairs, she found the printed articles she'd hidden in her drawer. Information about pemphigus, autoimmune disorders, treatment protocols. Robert had discovered them. "I know you're scared," he called from the bedroom, his voice barely carrying. "I'm scared too." On day 14, Robert insisted on working from home. He set up his laptop in bed, determined to prove he was fine, that life could continue as normal. By noon, the screen blurred before his eyes. By 2, he couldn't focus enough to read a single email. "Let me just finish this report," he muttered when Maggie appeared in the doorway. "Robert." He stood, swaying, determined to make it to the bathroom on his own. His legs folded halfway there. Maggie caught him before he hit the floor, but his weight pulled them both down. They ended up in a heap against the bathroom door frame, Robert's forehead pressed against the tile, Maggie's arms wrapped around his chest. "That's it," her voice allowed no argument. "I'm taking you to the hospital right now." But when she pulled back to look at him, his eyes had rolled back, showing only whites. His skin burned against hers, and his breathing came in shallow, rapid gasps. "Robert? Robert, can you hear me?" She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm voice felt obscene against her panic. "My husband collapsed. He's burning up with fever, skin condition, possibly infected." "Is he breathing?" "Is he conscious?" Maggie checked his pulse, racing, erratic, wrong. "He's breathing but not conscious. Please hurry." Robert's eyes fluttered open. He looked at her without recognition, his gaze distant and confused. "Jennifer? Is that you?" The name pierced her. "Robert, it's Maggie. Stay with me." "Jen, I'm sorry." Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. "I'm so sorry." The gun. April 14th. It was my fault. Maggie froze, her hand still on his chest. "What gun?" "Robert, what are you talking about?" But his eyes rolled back again, consciousness slipping away like water through fingers. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Maggie held him, feeling his heart hammer against her palm, and thought about the locked metal box in his desk drawer. She'd never opened it, respecting his privacy. Now she wondered what secrets it held. The paramedics burst through the door with practiced efficiency. They assessed Robert with swift competence. Blood pressure 90/60, temperature 104, heart rate dangerously high. Possible sepsis, they said. Possible system failure. "Any medical history we should know?" one asked while they loaded Robert onto the stretcher. "He was in the Gulf War." Maggie followed them to the ambulance. "But no combat injuries, he's reported." "Any old scars or injuries?" She hesitated. "He has a scar on his lower back. I asked once. He said hunting accident." The paramedic made a note. In the ambulance, Robert's hand suddenly gripped Maggie's with surprising strength. His eyes opened again, clearer this time, but desperate. "Don't let Claire," he gasped for air. "Don't let her know about the box." "What box?" "Robert, what's in the box?" But his hand went slack, consciousness abandoning him again. The paramedic increased the oxygen flow. "We need to step on it." At St. Mary's Hospital, they rushed Robert into a trauma bay. Dr. Alan Ramirez barked orders while nurses swarmed. Blood draws, IV lines, cardiac monitoring, cultures. The organized chaos of emergency medicine surrounded them. "How long has he had these blisters?" Dr. Ramirez asked, examining Robert's ravaged skin. 6 weeks, Maggie whispered. "He wouldn't get help, said he couldn't afford it." A nurse approached with a clipboard. "Ma'am, is there family we should call?" Maggie stared at the phone in her hand. Claire's contact information glowed on the screen. They hadn't spoken directly in months, only brief, painful text messages. Maggie's thumb hovered over the call button. "His daughter," she said finally, "but they're estranged." Dr. Ramirez looked up from his examination. "Ma'am, this is serious. If she's next of kin, she needs to know." The registration nurse typed into her computer, then paused. "His listed cardiologist is Dr. Claire Davidson at this hospital." "Is that his daughter?" Maggie's voice came out hollow. "She works here?" "She's on call tonight for cardiology consult service." Fate, Maggie thought, had a cruel sense of timing. Claire was already in this building, just floors above them, unaware that her father lay dying below. Dr. Sarah Kim arrived in the trauma bay within minutes, her dermatology residence coat still crisp despite the late hour. She stopped at the curtain's edge, her sharp intake of breath audible even over the monitor's insistent beeping. Robert's skin had transformed into a battlefield. Blisters upon blisters, some ruptured and weeping, others tense and angry red. His mouth hung open, revealing erosions that explained why he hadn't been eating. "This is pemphigus vulgaris," she said, moving closer. "Severe presentation, possibly triggered by an underlying condition we haven't identified yet." Dr. Ramirez nodded. "Can we start treatment?" "I'll take a biopsy to confirm, but we can't wait for results." Dr. Kim was already preparing her equipment. "Start 4-methylprednisolone, 1 gram. We need immunosuppression immediately." The nurses moved with practiced efficiency, hanging the medication bag, programming the IV pump. The clear fluid began its journey into Robert's bloodstream, carrying hope in chemical form. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, Robert's back arched off the bed, his body convulsing. "He's seizing!" A nurse grabbed for the side rails. Robert's throat began to swell. His oxygen saturation plummeted. 95, 90, 85. The monitors screamed their electronic panic. "Anaphylactic shock!" Dr. Ramirez grabbed the crash cart. "Get an EpiPen! Now!" Dr. Kim tore open the packaging, jabbed the auto-injector into Robert's thigh. Nothing. His lips were turning blue. "Another one! And push 50 of Benadryl!" The second EpiPen went in, this time slowly, agonizingly. Robert's airway began to open. His oxygen crept upward. The convulsions subsided into trembling. "That was the first-line treatment," Dr. Kim said quietly, staring at Robert's still form. "He's allergic to it. We can't use standard protocols." Maggie stood pressed against the wall, rosary beads cutting into her palm. "What does that mean?" "It means this just got much more complicated." 5 floors above, Claire Davidson jolted awake in the cardiology call room. Her pager shrieked, "Code Blue, ER Trauma 3!" She groaned, checking the time. 3 in the morning. She'd been asleep for maybe 40 minutes. The second page came before she could silence the first. "Cardiology consult needed. Trauma 3, stat!" She pulled on her white coat, finger-combing her hair into something professional. The tablet in her pocket displayed the basic chart. Davidson, Robert M., 45, acute respiratory distress, post-anaphylaxis. She frowned. Davidson was a common enough name, probably no relation. The emergency department sprawled before her, a maze of curtained bays and beeping machines. Trauma 3 was in the back corner. She pushed through the curtain, and time stopped. Her father lay on the table, intubated, his skin a horror show of blisters and blood. Maggie stood in the corner, face streaked with tears, looking small and old and terrified. Claire's tablet slipped from her hands, clattering against the linoleum. "Claire?" Maggie's voice broke. "Oh, thank God." "No." Claire backed toward the curtain. "No, this can't be." Dr. Ramirez turned. "Dr. Davidson? You're the cardiology consult?" "That's..." Claire couldn't make her mouth work properly. "That's my father." "I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I can call another..." "No." Claire forced herself to breathe. Years of medical training kicked in, building walls between emotion and action. "I'm here." "What's his status?" She listened to the rundown with clinical detachment. a skill she'd perfected during her residency. Severe pemphigus vulgaris, anaphylaxis to treatment. But when she approached the bed and put her stethoscope to his chest, she heard it. An irregular heartbeat, a murmur that shouldn't be there. "I need an echocardiogram." Her voice came out steady. "I'm hearing something. Possible endocarditis." Maggie stepped forward. What?" Claire still couldn't look at her. "Infection of the heart valve. Can happen when bacteria from the skin enters the bloodstream." The ultrasound technician arrived with portable equipment. Claire watched the screen as the probe moved across her father's chest, revealing the chambers of his heart in grayscale motion. There, on the mitral valve, a mass that didn't belong. Vegetation, they called it. A collection of bacteria and debris that would kill him if left untreated. Significant vegetation on the mitral valve. Claire's clinical voice held steady, even as her hands began to shake. "We need blood cultures, infectious disease consult, and admission to cardiac ICU. I'll take him as my patient," she added. "Transfer orders to cardiac ICU under my service." Maggie finally found her voice. "You're going to treat him?" "He's my patient." Claire's tone could have frozen water. "That's my job." But as she wrote admission orders at the nurse's station, her handwriting wavered and blurred. She pressed her palms flat against the counter, willing them to stop trembling. Behind her, they were preparing Robert for transport. Ahead of her, days or weeks of seeing him daily, making decisions about his care, watching him suffer or recover or die. She'd imagined their reunion 1,000 times over 3 years. Never like this. The cardiac ICU hummed with controlled urgency. Monitors beeped in careful rhythm. Ventilators whooshed their mechanical breathing. IV pumps clicked and whirred. Robert was settled into room 12, still sedated, still intubated, his ravaged skin carefully covered with specialized dressings. Claire stood at the nurse's station writing orders with meticulous attention. Anything to avoid entering that room. The ICU nurse, Diane, had worked there for 20 years and had seen every kind of family dynamic medicine could produce. "Dr. Davidson," Diane said gently, "the patient's wife wants to speak with you. Tell her I'll update her when I have more information. She specifically asked for you. She's scared." Claire closed her eyes. "Fine." 5 minutes. She forced herself through the doorway. Maggie sat at the bedside, holding Robert's hand, her face aged a decade overnight. She stood when Claire entered, and Claire instinctively moved to the far side of the room, maintaining maximum distance. "Claire, thank you for taking care of him. I'm doing my job." Claire crossed her arms. "That's all." "I know you're angry. You have every right. I'm not discussing this." Claire cut her off with surgical precision. "Let's focus on the patient. He's your father, not just the patient. He stopped being my father when he chose a business meeting over being with his dying wife." The words came out cold and hard, each one a stone thrown across 3 years of silence. Maggie's eyes filled with fresh tears. "That's not fair." "You don't know the whole. I know enough." Claire's voice cracked despite her efforts. "He chose work. Mom died alone. Well, not alone, I was there. But he wasn't. Your mother asked him to go." "Don't." Claire held up a hand. "I can't hear excuses right now." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unsaid things. Finally, Maggie asked the question that mattered. "Will he survive?" Claire shifted into clinical mode, safer territory. "The heart infection is serious. We need to identify the bacteria, start targeted antibiotics. The pemphigus complicates everything. We can't use standard immunosuppressants because of the anaphylaxis reaction." She paused. "If we can control the infection, maybe 50-50. Maggie covered her face with both hands, shoulders shaking. Claire felt her hand rising of its own accord, reaching out, then forced it back down. She couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I'll do everything I can," Claire said quietly. "Despite everything, I don't want him to die." Through the nights, Claire found reasons to stay. Paperwork, lab results, adjustments to medication drips. All true, all necessary, but none requiring her personal presence. She could have gone home. Instead, she took the chair across from Maggie, and they kept vigil together in silence. At 2 a.m, Maggie spoke. "He talks about you in his sleep. Says your name. Don't. You should know he carries a photo of you in his wallet. From your medical school graduation." Claire's head snapped up. "He wasn't at my graduation." "He was." Maggie's voice was soft. "He stayed in the back. Didn't want to upset you." Claire processed this information, turning it over in her mind like a stone with unexpected sharp edges. She said nothing, but something shifted in the room's atmosphere. At 3, Robert's fever spiked again. 105 degrees. Claire was on her feet instantly, calling orders, helping nurses pack him in cooling blankets. Her hands moved without thought, checking IV lines, adjusting medications. She found herself stroking his hair, a gesture from childhood she'd thought forgotten. She caught herself and stepped back, but not before Maggie saw. The older woman's sad smile said everything and nothing. At 4:30, blood culture results arrived on Claire's tablet. She frowned at the screen, then frowned deeper. Polymicrobial infection, multiple types of bacteria, unusual, wrong. Bacterial endocarditis typically showed a single organism. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered. Maggie looked up. "What is it?" "Multiple bacteria. It's like—" Claire trailed off, thinking. "I need to see something." She ordered a portable chest X-ray. The technician wheeled in the equipment, positioned Robert carefully, took the images. When they appeared on the screen, Claire zoomed in on the spine area, then stopped breathing. "What?" Maggie stood, moving closer. "What do you see?" "There's metal in his back." "Near the spine." Claire's voice had gone flat, professional shock taking over. "Metal? Like surgical hardware?" "No. This is—" Claire zoomed closer, her medical training cataloging what her eyes couldn't quite believe. "This is a bullet. Or bullet fragments." Maggie's face went white. "A bullet? How? When?" "I don't know. It's been there a long time, decades based on the tissue reaction around it." Claire was already ordering a CT scan. "I need better imaging. Now." Maggie sank back into her chair, remembering Robert's delirious ramblings in their bathroom. The gun. April 14th. It was my fault. She dismissed it as fever dreams. Now she wondered what else she'd dismissed. As the sky began to lighten outside, Maggie made a decision. "I need to go home, get some of Robert's things. And—" she hesitated. "He mentioned a box in his delirium. I think I need to find it." Claire looked at her directly for the first time since entering the room. "What kind of box?" I don't know. But he was adamant you shouldn't know about it. Then definitely find it. Maggie drove through empty pre-dawn streets, her mind churning. The house felt wrong without Robert, too quiet, too still. She stood in his office doorway for a long moment before entering. His desk was neat, organized, every pen in its place. The bottom drawer was locked. She searched for the key, finding it taped under the desk like something from a spy novel. The drawer opened with a rusty squeal. Inside, a metal lockbox, also locked. But Robert's personal effects from the hospital included his keychain. Her hands shook as she fitted the small key into the lock. Inside, the pieces of a life she hadn't known existed. Cash, bundled and banded. $47,000. A label in Robert's neat handwriting. For Jennifer's headstone. A bullet casing, polished until it shone. Engraved, April 14th, 1987. The day I chose to live. 2 photographs. The first showed Robert and Jennifer young and smiling. The second showed the same 2 people, Jennifer with a black eye, Robert's face scratched and swollen. Military enlistment papers, dated June 1987. And a letter. Yellowed with age, creased from repeated folding and unfolding, Robert's handwriting, young and uncertain. Maggie read it standing up, unable to make her legs move to a chair. With each line, the floor seemed less solid beneath her feet. Dear Jennifer, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Good, I deserve it. The confession that followed was brutal in its honesty. An attempted assault, Jennifer's act of self-defense, the gunshot that should have killed him, but instead became his salvation. 2 years of transformation, a marriage built on the ashes of the worst night of both their lives. This bullet in my back is my reminder. I am capable of darkness. I must choose light every day. The letter went on, failures and relapses, guilt compounding over decades, and finally, this disease is my punishment. I accept it. Maggie sat down hard, the letter falling from her hands. Robert had tried to rape Jennifer. Jennifer had shot him. And then, impossibly, they'd built a life together, a daughter. 25 years of marriage that it seemed, from the outside, genuinely happy. She thought about the man she'd married, gentle and kind, haunted but good. She thought about the 19-year-old monster in the letter. She couldn't reconcile them. But Jennifer had. Jennifer had seen something worth saving. Maggie gathered the box's contents carefully, placed everything back except the letter. That she folded and put in her purse. Claire needed to see it. Deserved to see it. Understanding didn't require forgiveness, but it might make forgiveness possible. The drive back to the hospital took forever and no time at all. She found Claire in the cafeteria, staring at untouched coffee, dark circles under her eyes making her look older than her 38 years. We need to talk. Maggie sat down without asking. Privately. They found an empty conference room. Maggie placed the letter on the table between them like a bomb. Before you read this, Maggie said carefully, you need to know your mother forgave him. She chose to marry him knowing everything. What are you talking about? Just read. Claire read. Maggie watched her daughter by marriage's face transform. Shock, horror, disbelief, rage, grief, cycling through in waves. When Claire finished, she stood up so fast her chair fell backward. She paced, sat down, stood again, picked up the letter and threw it across the room, retrieved it, and smoothed it out with shaking hands. "He tried to rape my mother?" Claire's voice was barely audible. "Yes. She shot him in self-defense." "And then?" Claire's voice rose. "And then they got married? How? How could she possibly—" "I don't know the whole story," Maggie said quietly. "But your mother loved him. She must have believed he changed. How could she?" Claire was pacing again, unable to stand still. How could she marry someone who tried to? She couldn't finish the sentence. "People can change, Claire. Real, fundamental change. Your mother believed that." "Did you know about this?" "Not until this morning. Jennifer never told me." Claire sank into a chair, head in her hands. "Everything I thought I knew about my parents is a lie." "Not a lie, just incomplete." Maggie moved closer, risking Claire's anger. "Your father spent 38 years being a different person, a better person. That's not nothing. But the bullet's still there. Literally." Claire looked up, understanding dawning. "It's killing him now. The infection, the timing, it's all connected to that goddamn bullet." "Maybe that's why he didn't want treatment," Maggie said softly. "Maybe he thinks he deserves to die." Claire's eyes widened. "What?" "The letter says, 'This disease is my punishment. I accept it.' He's been letting himself die, Claire, choosing it." The implications crashed over Claire like cold water. The delays in seeking treatment, the refusal of the ambulance, the passive acceptance of his body's betrayal. Her father had been committing slow suicide, and she'd been too angry to see it. "Oh, God," Claire stood. "I need to see him." "What are you going to do?" Claire's jaw set with determination. "Save him." "And then?" "I don't know. But I can't let him die. Not like this, not when he's given up." She walked toward the ICU with purpose, the letter folded in her pocket, her world rewritten in her father's fading handwriting. The conference room felt too small for the weight of the decisions being made. Dr. Michael Morrison spread the CT scan images across the table like tarot cards predicting an uncertain future. Claire sat between her professional role and her personal devastation, while Maggie twisted a tissue into increasingly smaller pieces. Dr. Morrison pointed to the images with a pen. "The bullet fragments are located here, adjacent to the L3 and L4 vertebrae. We count 4 major pieces, with smaller fragments scattered in the surrounding tissue. They've been degrading slowly over," he checked the chart, 38 years. Dr. Sarah Kim leaned forward. "The lead has been leaching into the tissues." Chronic lead toxicity. That's what triggered the autoimmune collapse. "The pemphigus," Claire said, understanding flooding through her. "The bullet caused the pemphigus." "Yes, and the pemphigus caused the skin breakdown, which allowed bacteria to enter the bloodstream, which led to the endocarditis. It's all connected. Everything traces back to that bullet." Dr. Morrison pulled up another image. "The heart valve is severely damaged. The vegetation here," he pointed to a gray mass on the screen, "is roughly the size of a grape. Pieces could break off at any time and cause a massive stroke. We need to operate." "But the bullet," Dr. Alan Ramirez said. "Do we address it or not?" Morrison nodded. "That's the question. We have 3 options. He ticked them off on his fingers. Option 1. Replace the valve only. Patient survives, short term, but lead poisoning continues. He'll be back in crisis within 6 months, maybe less. Option 2. Replace the valve and remove the bullet fragments. Permanent solution if successful, but removing fragments near the spine carries a 50% risk of paralysis. Option 3. Do nothing. Patient dies within 48 to 72 hours. The silence that followed felt like a physical presence in the room. Legally, Morrison continued, Mrs. Davidson is next of kin. She makes the final decision. But Dr. Davidson, you're family too, and you're his physician. We'd like consensus. Maggie looked at Claire. You're the doctor. What do you think we should do? Claire stared at her father's scans, seeing past the medical images to the man who'd carried this metal inside him for nearly 4 decades. A reminder, his letter had said. A punishment. Medically? Claire kept her voice steady. Option 2 is best long-term. Remove the source of the toxicity. But the paralysis risk. If you were making this decision as his daughter, not his doctor, Maggie interrupted gently, what would you choose? Claire closed her eyes, saw her father on the operating table, saw him in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, unable to walk but alive, saw him dying slowly over 6 months, the bullet continuing its decades-long murder. I'd want him to have a chance at a real life, she said finally. Not 6 more months of suffering. Maggie nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. Dr. Morrison looked between them. You're both sure? If he wakes up paralyzed, he's lived with that bullet for 38 years as punishment, Maggie said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. It's time to let it go. Claire heard the double meaning. Let go of the bullet, let go of the guilt. Agreed. The surgical team dispersed to prepare. Claire and Maggie were left alone with the images of Robert's broken body still glowing on the screen. You know what he did, Claire said. It wasn't a question. I read the letter too. And you still want to save him? Maggie turned to face her. Your mother saved him first. She saw something worth saving. I trust her judgment. I don't know if I can forgive him. You don't have to. Not today. Maybe not ever. Maggie reached across the table, stopped just short of taking Claire's hand. But you can choose not to let him die. Those are different things. At 4 o'clock, they wheeled Robert toward the operating room. Claire and Maggie walked on either side of the gurney, an escort of complicated love. At the pre-op bay, the anesthesia team began their preparations. This was the moment, last chance to speak before he disappeared behind surgical doors for 5 hours, or forever. Claire approached the bed for the first time since this nightmare began. She looked down at her father's unconscious face, so much older than she remembered, worn down by years of self-inflicted penance. She took his hand, feeling how small it seemed, how fragile. I read your letter, she whispered, knowing he couldn't hear, but needing to say it anyway. I know what you did. I know what Mom did. And I don't know if I can forgive you. Tears fell onto the white sheet. She didn't wipe them away. But I'm not letting you die. You don't get to take the easy way out. You don't get to make this decision for yourself anymore. Maggie moved to the other side of the bed, placed her hand over both of theirs. We're both fighting for you, Robert. Now you need to fight too. The transport team began disconnecting monitors, preparing to move. As they unlocked the bed's wheels, Robert's eyes fluttered open. Just for a moment, confused, disoriented, but seeing His gaze found Claire's face, and something like recognition flickered there. His lips moved. No sound. The breathing tube prevented speech. But Claire had grown up reading her father's expressions, his unspoken words. "I'm sorry." Then his eyes closed again, and he was gone into the medicinal depths of unconscious. They wheeled him away, and Claire stood watching until the surgical doors swung closed behind him, her hand still warm from his touch. The waiting room smelled of bad coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Other families occupied the scattered chairs, each wrapped in their own private fears. Claire and Maggie chose seats in the corner, away from the television that nobody was watching. 5 hours. That's how long Morrison had estimated. Claire checked her phone. 4:47 p.m. By 10, they'd know. "I should tell you something," Maggie said after the first hour of silence, "about your mother, about why I married your father." Claire looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. Maggie had aged since Jennifer's death. Grief had carved new lines around her eyes, her mouth. Or maybe guilt had done it. Maybe love. 3 days before your mother died," Maggie continued, "she asked me to visit her in hospice. Alone. No nurses, no your father, just us." Claire's phone slipped in her suddenly nerveless fingers. "What did she say?" "She made me promise something." Maggie's eyes were distant, seeing that hospital room, that last conversation. "She said, if Robert survives me when I die, he's going to try to follow me, either quickly or slowly." Claire felt cold. Her mother had known, had seen what Claire was only now understanding. "She asked me to take care of him. Not as a friend, as more." Maggie's voice cracked. "She asked me to save him when she couldn't anymore." "She asked you to marry him?" Claire couldn't keep the shock from her voice. She knew he wouldn't survive alone. She was right. Even with me, look what happened. "So you married him out of duty?" "No." Maggie's voice turned fierce. "I married him because I love him. I've loved him since we were all in high school together, long before he and Jennifer got together. Your mother knew that. She was giving us both permission to find happiness after she was gone." Claire tried to process this. Her mother, dying, orchestrating a second marriage for her husband, choosing her best friend to be her replacement, knowing that friend had loved Robert all along. It should have felt like betrayal. Instead, it felt like the most profound act of love Claire could imagine. "Did Dad know? About your feelings?" "Not until I told him." After the funeral, after enough time had passed that it didn't feel obscene, Maggie smiled sadly. "Your mother understood something I'm only now putting into words. People are more than their worst moment. Your father's worst moment was 38 years ago. Everything since then has been his redemption." 6 o'clock came and went. 7. Claire paced. Saturday. Checked her phone. Paced again. Maggie prayed her rosary, the beads clicking softly in the quiet room. Other families left, called back to rooms where their loved ones had survived surgery. The waiting room emptied around them. At 8:15, a nurse emerged. "Dr. Davidson? The surgery team asked me to update you. The valve replacement is complete and went well. They're beginning the bullet extraction now." "How much longer?" Claire's voice came out hoarse. "At least another 2 hours. The fragments are very close to the nerve roots. They have to work slowly." 2 more hours stretched into eternity. Claire bought coffee. Neither of them drank. Maggie called her sister, spoke in low tones, hung up, looking even more worried. The waiting room lights seemed to grow harsher as night settled outside. At 10:30, the surgical doors burst open. A nurse ran through, moving fast. Claire was on her feet instantly. "What's happening?" "Complications," the nurse called back, not stopping. "They need more blood. He's hemorrhaging." Claire grabbed Maggie's arm, whether to steady herself or the other woman she didn't know. They stood frozen, listening to the increased activity beyond those doors. Voices raised in urgency. The crash cart being wheeled past at a run. "He's dying," Maggie whispered. "Oh God, he's dying in there." Minutes crawled by like hours. Claire's medical training supplied too many scenarios, each worse than the last. Massive blood loss, cardiac arrest, stroke. Her father was in that room, his chest cracked open, his heart exposed, and she could do nothing. At 11:47 p.m., Dr. Morrison finally emerged. His scrubs were dark with sweat and blood. His face was gray with exhaustion. Claire read his expression before he spoke, the careful, neutral look of a surgeon preparing to deliver complicated news. "He made it," Morrison said, and Maggie collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "What happened?" Claire demanded. "We saw the crash cart." "His heart stopped during the bullet extraction. We think it was an air embolism during the position change, or electrical instability from all the cardiac manipulation. He went into VFIB." Morrison sat down heavily. "We had to shock him 3 times. He was down for about 90 seconds. Claire's medical brain translated cardiac arrest, defibrillation, anoxia. 90 seconds without oxygen to the brain. Brain damage? "We don't know yet. He's stable now. The valve replacement was successful, and we removed all the bullet fragments we could find. Dr. Chen tested nerve function. He has motor response in both legs, no paralysis." "But the cardiac arrest?" "We won't know the extent of any neurological damage until he wakes up." Morrison stood. "I need to prepare you for the possibility that he might not wake up. The combination of the arrest, the anesthesia, the trauma to his system, we're keeping him heavily sedated for now. In 48 hours, we'll try to wake him." They transferred Robert to the cardiac ICU, same room as before, but now he looked like he'd been through a war. Chest tube, draining blood-tinged fluid, new scars from sternum to abdomen, pale as death, but alive. The monitors beeped steadily, a rhythm Claire focused on like a lifeline. Maggie took the chair on one side of the bed. Claire, after a moment's hesitation, took the other. They sat in silence, watching him breathe. "Thank you," Maggie said finally, "for choosing to save him." Claire didn't answer. She wasn't sure what she'd chosen, or why. Only that she couldn't let him go. Not yet. Not with so much still unsaid between them. Through the night, they kept vigil. The city outside the window gradually quieted. Other ICU patients' families came and went. Nurses checked vitals, adjusted medications, spoke in soft voices that respected the sacred nature of this waiting. At 3 a.m, Claire finally spoke. "I don't know how to forgive him." "Maybe you start by forgiving yourself," Maggie said. "For what?" "For not being there when your mother died. For being angry at your father. For being human and imperfect and hurt." Maggie reached across the bed, across Robert's still form, and this time Claire let her take her hand. "Forgiveness isn't about what people deserve," It's about what we need to let go of." They sat like that. Two women connected by the unconscious man between them, by love and anger and hope and fear, and waited for dawn. 5 days passed like a slow death. The doctors lightened Robert's sedation gradually, waiting for signs of consciousness that didn't come. His eyes remained closed, his body still, except for the mechanical rise and fall of his chest. The ventilator breathed for him. The machines kept him alive. But he didn't wake. Claire and Maggie established a rhythm without discussing it. Claire took the day shifts between her other patient rounds. Maggie took the nights. They overlapped during morning and evening, sitting on opposite sides of the bed like sentries, guarding something precious and possibly already lost. On day 3, the neurologist performed tests that made Claire's stomach clench. Reflex responses were present but sluggish. Brain activity showed normal patterns, but Robert remained locked away somewhere the tests couldn't reach. "Give it time," the neurologist said, the universal doctor's answer when they had no answers. On day 4, they removed the breathing tube. Robert breathed on his own, which should have been encouraging, but he still didn't open his eyes. His skin was healing, the pemphigus retreating under aggressive treatment now that the source of his immune system's rebellion had been removed. But what good was healed skin on a body with no one home inside? Claire sat beside him that night, her shift extending into Maggie's without discussion. She'd brought her mother's old journals from home, thinking she might read them aloud. Jennifer had believed in the power of familiar voices to call people back from the edge of consciousness. Claire wasn't sure she believed it, but she was desperate enough to try anything. "Dear Diary," she read, her mother's teenage handwriting making her voice catch. "Today I met a boy named Robert Davidson. He has the greenest eyes I've ever seen. I think I might love him." The entry was dated 1986, a year before everything fell apart, before the monster emerged, before the gun. Claire kept reading, moving through entries that showed a love story she'd never fully known. Jennifer's doubts, her hopes, her gradual falling for a boy who seemed perfect until he wasn't. Then she reached April 15th, 1987, the day after. "I shot him last night. I shot Robert. My hands are still shaking. The police believed it was an accident. Dad's gun was always loaded, always accessible. They think Robert startled me in the dark. I let them think that. I couldn't tell them the truth, that I aimed for his leg and missed, that I'd have killed him if the bullet had gone 6 inches to the right. I couldn't tell them what he tried to do to me, because despite everything, I can still see the boy I fell in love with, somewhere inside the monster he became last night. And I think, God help me, I think I want to save him." Claire's voice broke. She looked at her father's unconscious face, imagining him young and drunk and dangerous, imagining her mother's terror, her courage, her impossible compassion. "You don't deserve this," Claire whispered, closing the journal. "You don't deserve her forgiveness. You don't deserve mine. But she gave you hers anyway. And I'm trying to understand why." She reached for his hand, surprised by her own gesture. His fingers were warm, slack, unresponsive. "So wake up, Dad. Wake up and explain it to me. Explain how someone like you became someone like her husband. Explain how I'm supposed to feel about any of this." His hand twitched in hers. Claire froze. "Dad?" Another twitch. Then his fingers curled, just slightly, around hers. The heart monitor's rhythm changed, faster, more erratic. His eyelids fluttered. "Maggie!" Claire shouted. "Get the nurse! He's waking up!" The room exploded into activity. Nurses rushed in, checking vitals, shining lights in his eyes. Maggie appeared at the door, breathless. Robert's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, pupils contracting against the harsh fluorescent light. He saw Claire's face hovering above him. His lips moved, forming her name without sound. "I'm here," she said, tears streaming down her face without permission. "Dad, I'm here." His gaze shifted, found Maggie. Recognition flickered, then confusion. "How long?" "5 days," Maggie said, moving to his other side. "You've been unconscious for 5 days since the surgery." Robert tried to move his legs. Claire saw the panic in his eyes, the fear that had been with him since they'd explained the paralysis risk. "Can you move your toes?" she asked. He concentrated. His toes moved beneath the blanket. Relief flooded his face, followed immediately by tears. "I can feel them. I'm not paralyzed." He broke down then, sobbing with the rawness of someone who'd been holding back for decades. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to live." Claire and Maggie exchanged glances. Maggie nodded slightly, giving permission. "Maybe not," Claire said, her voice steady despite her own tears. "But you're going to anyway." Evening settled over the ICU with the quiet efficiency of shift change. New nurses arrived, checked charts, exchanged information in hushed voices. Robert had been awake for 6 hours now, and the medical team agreed he was stable enough for visitors to stay longer. Claire sent Maggie home to rest, promising to call if anything changed. She needed this conversation alone with her father. Robert lay propped on pillows, the head of his bed raised just enough that they could see each other's faces. He looked small in the hospital bed, diminished not just by surgery, but by years of carrying guilt that had literally poisoned him. His hands picked at the blanket edge, a nervous gesture Claire remembered from childhood. "You found the box," he said finally, not a question. "Maggie found it, after you collapsed." Claire pulled her chair closer, the letter from the metal box heavy in her pocket. "I read everything." Robert closed his eyes. "Then you know what I am, what I did." "I know what you were at 19. Claire chose her words carefully, feeling her way through territory she'd never expected to navigate. "Tell me the rest, all of it. You owe me that much." So he told her. The story came out in pieces, jagged and painful, each word seeming to cost him something. He described the person he'd been before that night, angry, drowning in grief over his father's recent death, self-medicating with alcohol until the alcohol became the problem. He told her about Jennifer trying to end things, about his drunken rage, about becoming something monstrous. "I don't remember all of it," he admitted, shame making his voice drop to almost nothing. "I was blackout drunk. But I remember enough. I remember her saying no. I remember not stopping. I remember her running, and me following her into that bedroom. She shot you. She saved my life." Robert's eyes opened, meeting Claire's directly for the first time. "The bullet should have hit my spine. Should have killed me or paralyzed me. Instead, it lodged just to the left. When I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, the doctors said it was a miracle." "Some miracle? It's been slowly killing you for 38 years. "I deserved that, too." Robert's voice was flat, accepting. "I wanted the bullet to stay. The doctors said they could remove it, but I refused. I told them I was afraid of the surgery risks, but that was a lie. I wanted to carry it. I needed the reminder. Claire pulled the letter from her pocket, unfolded it on her lap. You wrote this the day after she shot you. April 14th, 1987. The worst and best day of my life. Robert stared at the ceiling. Worst because of what I'd become. Best because Jennifer came to visit me in that hospital. She stood in the doorway, and I thought she was there to press charges, thought I was going to prison. I would have deserved it. What did she say? She said, I should let you die. I should tell the police what really happened. And I said, you should. Please. Robert's hands clenched the blanket. But then she said, but I'm not going to. I'm going to give you one chance. One. To become someone different. Someone who never exists again. Claire listened, her mother's voice echoing across the years through her father's words. She visited me every day for 3 weeks, made me promise things, get sober, go to therapy, face what I'd done, change completely, or she'd turn me in. Robert's voice cracked. She said she saw something in me worth saving. I don't know what she saw, but I spent 2 years trying to become it. The military service. That was the final step. Discipline, structure, learning to take orders instead of thinking I was entitled to take whatever I wanted. He shifted carefully, mindful of his surgical incisions. When I came back in 1989, I asked Jennifer to marry me. She said yes, but with conditions. Stay sober, keep going to therapy. Never tell anyone about that night, because she didn't want to live as a victim. She wanted to move forward, not back. And you agreed. I would have agreed to anything. She was giving me a life I didn't deserve. Robert looked at Claire now, his eyes red-rimmed. We got married on April 14th, 1989, exactly 2 years after she shot me. She said it would be our reminder, death and rebirth on the same date. Claire absorbed this, trying to reconcile the monster in the story with the father she'd known growing up. Gentle, if distant, sober and steady, present at school events, if quiet, never raising his voice, never showing anger. She'd thought him emotionally distant. Now she understood it was control, carefully maintained every single day. You relapsed, she said, remembering the letter's mention of it. After you were born. Postpartum depression isn't just for mothers. I fell apart, started drinking again. Jennifer threatened to leave, to take you. That scared me straight faster than anything else could have. Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. I never touched alcohol again. 16 years sober when your mother died. The silence stretched between them. Machines beeped. Somewhere down the hall, another patient called for a nurse. Claire sat with the weight of her parents' secret. This tremendous burden they'd carried together, never sharing it with their daughter. Why didn't you tell me? She asked finally. After Mom died, why didn't you explain? How could I? Your mother was the most incredible person who ever lived because she forgave me for trying to rape her? Robert's laugh was bitter. I couldn't destroy your image of her. Or of me. Better you think I was just absent-minded, work-obsessed, than know the truth. But I blamed you for not being there when she died. I know. I deserved that too. Robert reached for the water cup on his bedside table with shaking hands. Claire helped him, holding the straw to his lips. Your mother made me go on that trip, Claire. She knew she was dying. She didn't want me to watch it happen. She said she'd rather I remember her alive. Claire felt something crack open inside her chest. She told me the same thing. She sent me to the hospital that day to cover a colleague's shift. She said she'd be fine, that I should go. But I thought if I'd stayed, maybe what? You could have stopped cancer? Robert set down the cup. We both blamed ourselves for her death when the only one to blame was circumstance. Bad luck. Cells dividing wrong. Nothing we could have prevented. You tried to die afterward. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. You let yourself get sick. You ignored the symptoms because you wanted to follow her. Not consciously, or maybe consciously, I don't know anymore. Robert closed his eyes. I just know that when the blisters started, I felt relief. Like maybe this was it, my punishment finally arriving. I'd escaped for 38 years, but the bill was coming due. Claire stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Portland spread out below them, lights twinkling in the November darkness. Normal people living normal lives without these impossible moral calculations. "I'm so angry at you," she said to the glass, "for what you did to Mom, for trying to leave me, for making me choose whether to save someone who maybe doesn't deserve saving. You're right to be angry, but I'm also angry at myself." Claire turned back to face him. "For not being there for Mom. For cutting you off for 3 years. For almost letting you die before understanding any of this." "Claire!" "No. Let me finish." She moved back to the bedside, gripped the rail. "Mom gave you a second chance. She believed people could change, fundamentally change. And you did. The man who hurt her isn't the man who raised me. I know that. I've always known that, even when I didn't know the details." Robert was crying again, silently, tears tracking down his weathered face. "I don't know if I can forgive you for what you did to her," Claire continued, her own voice breaking. "That's not my forgiveness to give. It was hers, and she gave it. But I can forgive you for trying to die, for leaving me alone with this grief." She reached out, took his hand. "And I can try to understand that you've been punishing yourself more than I ever could." "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Probably not." Claire squeezed his hand. "But I'm giving it anyway. Not because you've earned it, but because I choose to. The way Mom chose to forgive you. The way she chose to save you. The way she chose love over hate every single day for 34 years. Robert pulled their clasped hands to his face, sobbing into them. Claire let him. This moment of connection, more than they'd had in years. When he finally quieted, she sat back down, still holding his hand. "We're going to have to figure out how to be father and daughter again," she said. "I don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out." "I'd like that," Robert whispered. Through the window, the first stars appeared in the clearing sky. The storm, it seemed, was finally breaking. Recovery came in increments, measured in tubes removed, machines disconnected, steps taken. Robert spent 2 weeks in the cardiac ICU, then transferred to the rehabilitation wing, where physical therapists put him through paces that left him exhausted and humbled. The pemphigus retreated under aggressive treatment, his skin healing in patches that would leave scars, reminders less brutal than the bullet had been, but reminders nonetheless. Claire visited daily, her shifts at the hospital making it easy to stop by. Their conversations were tentative at first, feeling their way through years of silence and new understanding. They talked about medicine, about his physical therapy progress, about neutral topics that didn't require emotional excavation. But gradually, carefully, they began to talk about Jennifer, about memories they shared, about the woman who'd shaped both their lives in ways they were only now fully understanding. Maggie was there every day, all day, learning Robert's new medications, his dietary restrictions, his physical therapy exercises. The nurses joked that she should be on staff. She'd been a nurse in Vietnam. Caregiving was in her blood. But Claire saw something else in Maggie's dedication. A woman honoring a promise made to a dying friend. And more than that, a woman loving someone despite knowing his darkest secrets. 6 weeks after the surgery, Robert came home. The house had been modified during his absence. Grab bars in the bathroom, a hospital bed in what had been the guest room on the first floor, ramps at the entrances. He walked with a cane, his gait unsteady but improving daily. The doctor said he'd likely always have some weakness on his left side, some numbness in his foot, but these were acceptable losses compared to paralysis or death. Thanksgiving arrived with unexpected warmth, one of those autumn days that felt like a gift. Claire had agreed to come for dinner, the first time she'd be in her father's house since before her mother's death. She stood on the porch for a full minute before ringing the doorbell, her hand clutching a bouquet of chrysanthemums so tightly the stems bent. Robert answered the door himself, pride evident in his refusal of Maggie's hovering assistance. He wore a cardigan Claire remembered from years ago, faded but clean, and the effort of standing upright was visible in the set of his shoulders. "Claire," he smiled, awkward but genuine. "Come in." The house smelled of roasting turkey and corn muffins, Jennifer's recipe filling the air with memories. Claire stepped inside, cataloging changes and similarities. Her mother's photos still lined the hallway, but new ones had been added, pictures of Maggie and Robert from their wedding, casual shots from the past year. It didn't feel like erasure. It felt like life continuing, as it should. Maggie emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Perfect timing. Everything's almost ready. They moved through the rituals of holiday preparation with stilted politeness. 3 people who'd been strangers learning to be family. Robert and Claire set the table together, and in that simple task something loosened. He told her about the cloth napkins Jennifer had insisted on. "Paper napkins are uncivilized," he said, in a high, affected voice that was clearly meant to mimic her mother. Claire laughed, startled by the sound of her own laughter in this house. "I remember," she said. "She had a whole speech about it. Something about respecting the meal and the people sharing it." Robert carefully folded a napkin, his movements still slow and deliberate. She believed meals were sacred, time set apart. They sat down at 5 o'clock, sunlight slanting through the windows. The table held turkey and stuffing, cranberry sauce and green beans, and those corn muffins that connected past to present like an edible thread. They joined hands, Claire between her father and Maggie, completing the circle, and Robert bowed his head. "Should we say grace?" he asked. "I know we never used to, but—" "Since when do you say grace?" Claire interrupted, surprised. "Since I realized how much I have to be grateful for." Robert's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "Would that be okay?" Claire nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Thank you," Robert said, his voice steady, "for second chances. And third chances. Thank you for Jennifer, who saved my life twice. once in 1987, and again by leaving the people she did to watch over me. Thank you for Maggie, who honors a promise and loves me anyway. Thank you for Claire, who chose to save me when I'd given up on myself. Thank you for this meal, this moment, this imperfect, impossible family. Amen. Amen, Maggie echoed, tears on her cheeks. Amen, Claire whispered. They ate, and somewhere between the turkey and the pie, they stopped being strangers. Stories emerged, funny ones and sad ones, memories of Jennifer that didn't hurt quite so much in the sharing. Maggie told stories about Jennifer from high school, a younger version Claire had never known. Robert shared memories of early marriage, mistakes made, and lessons learned. Claire found herself talking about her mother's final days, the conversations they'd had, the peace Jennifer had found at the end. She wasn't afraid, Claire said, pushing pie around her plate. She said she'd lived exactly the life she wanted. She said she had no regrets. Robert set down his fork. She told me something similar. The day before she died, when she made me promise to go on that business trip. He looked at Maggie. She said, "You saved me once, Robert. Don't let my death destroy what we built. Promise me you'll let someone else save you when I'm gone." She knew, Claire said, understanding dawning. She knew you'd try to follow her. She knew me better than I knew myself. Robert reached across the table, taking Maggie's hand. And she knew who to send to pull me back from the edge. Maggie smiled through tears. I loved her like a sister. Loving you felt like honoring her. It took me a long time to realize I could do both. Honor her memory and build something new. Claire watched their joined hands, saw the genuine affection there, and felt the last of her resentment toward Maggie dissolve. Her mother had orchestrated this, had known that Robert and Claire would both need Maggie in different ways. It was manipulation, perhaps, but manipulation born of profound love and understanding. After dinner, Claire helped with dishes while Robert rested in the living room. The kitchen window showed him in profile, eyes closed, a slight smile on his face. He looked peaceful in a way she hadn't seen in years, maybe ever. "Thank you," Maggie said quietly, hands deep in soapy water, "for coming today, for giving him another chance. Thank you for saving him when I couldn't." Claire dried a plate, set it carefully in the cabinet. "I'm sorry I was cold to you before. You were grieving too, and I made it harder. You were protecting your mother's memory." I understood. "Mom chose well," Claire said, the words coming easier than she'd expected. "When she chose you for Dad. When she chose you for us." Maggie turned to her, and they embraced awkwardly, two women learning to be family through grief and hope and Jennifer's enduring love. Claire stayed until dark, until Robert started yawning behind his hand and Maggie began the gentle work of getting him ready for bed. At the door, Claire hugged her father carefully, mindful of healing incisions and new scars. "Come back soon?" he asked, hope and fear mixed in his voice. "I will. I promise." And she meant it. 4 months later, on a mild March afternoon, 3 people stood at Rose Hill Cemetery. Cherry blossoms had begun to bloom, their pink petals drifting down like benediction. Robert walked without the cane now, though he tired easily and still felt phantom twinges where the bullet had lived for 38 years. Claire stood to his right, Maggie to his left, and together They approached Jennifer's grave. The headstone was simple granite, elegant. Jennifer Marie Davidson, 1969 to 2021. Beloved wife, mother, friend. Love believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Robert knelt slowly, Claire and Maggie each taking an arm to help him down. From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small wooden box. Inside, nestled in cotton, were the bullet fragments the surgeons had removed, cleaned, polished, transformed from weapons to relics. "Jen," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet cemetery, "I brought you something. I'm letting go, like you wanted me to. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I almost died trying to punish myself. But our daughter saved me, and Maggie saved me, just like you saved me." He placed the fragments on the base of the headstone, metal glinting in the spring sun. "Thank you for believing in me when I was 19 and stupid. Thank you for 34 years of happiness. Thank you for Claire. Thank you for Maggie. Thank you for showing me that people can change, that redemption is possible, that love is stronger than shame." Robert's voice broke. Claire and Maggie each took one of his hands. "I'll always love you, but I'm letting go of the guilt now. I'm choosing life, really choosing it, not just existing, because that's what you wanted. That's what you died believing I could do." He placed a single white rose on the grave, then handed roses to both women. "For the women who saved me," he said. They stood together, three people connected by love and loss and Jennifer's extraordinary faith in human transformation. The cherry blossoms fell around them like snow, covering the bullet fragments in soft pink, life overgrowing death. "Ready?" Claire asked gently. Robert looked at the grave one last time, then at his daughter, then at his wife. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go home." They walked together toward the car, Robert between the two women who'd refused to let him destroy himself. The spring sunshine broke through the clouds, warm on their faces. Behind them, on Jennifer's grave, the polished metal fragments caught the light. A burden finally laid down. A punishment finally released. Robert's voice drifted back to them. "Jennifer gave me a second chance at life. Claire gave me a third. This time, I'm not wasting it." The car doors closed. The engine started. They drove away from the cemetery, from the past, toward whatever future they could build together. On the grave, a cherry blossom petal landed on the bullet fragments. Soft pink against hard metal. Forgiveness covering guilt. Hope overgrowing shame. Life insisting on continuing despite everything. In the end, that was Jennifer's final gift. The belief that no one is beyond redemption. That love can transform even the darkest moment into something that blooms. 3 people carried that gift forward, imperfect and scarred, but choosing, always choosing, to live. Sometimes the heaviest burdens we carry aren't the ones we can see. Robert Davidson carried a bullet in his back for 38 years, a reminder of his worst moment, a punishment he believed he deserved. But that burden nearly killed him. poisoning his body slowly until his daughter had to choose whether to save a father who'd given up on himself. This story asks us the hardest questions. Can people truly change? Is redemption possible after unforgivable acts? Robert's wife Jennifer believed it was. She saw past one terrible night to the man he could become. And she was right. He spent decades being better, being different, until grief over losing her made him forget his own worth. We all carry invisible bullets, guilt, shame, regrets that poison us from the inside. But this story reminds us that it's never too late to let them go, to choose life over self-punishment, to accept that we're more than our worst moments. Robert's daughter said it perfectly. Forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. It's about what we need to let go of.
What burden have you been carrying that's time to release? Have you ever given someone a second chance and watched them transform? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.